I've never had any experiences, and as such, don't really believe in ghosts, but have had a couple accounts made by perfectly sane and intelligent people whom I was well acquainted that are difficult to dismiss. In 2001, I lived with my new husband and a couple of roommates in Savannah Got. One night, our roommate's good friend and his boyfriend showed up on our doorstep somewhere around 3 a.m. One of them had just been dragged out of bed and down the stairs from the throat by an unseen force in the old mansion turned artists collective where they were staying. They were petrified and didn't sleep there again. 20 years later, we visited Savannah during spring break with our daughters and for kicks. Went on a ghost tour and realized the house our friends stayed in all those years ago was on the tour. It was the Sorrel Weed House. Around the same time, early 2000s, another set of friends, equally as sane, trustworthy, and intelligent bought an old farmhouse outside. It had a 300-year-old oak tree out the back door and a widow's walk you accessed from the unfinished attic. They claimed a radio would regularly start playing loudly from the attic at odd hours of the night, accompanied by loud footsteps and the sounds of things smashing and breaking. There were no radios in the attic, and no one was ever up there.
At our old house, our photo frames, which lean backwards, would occasionally jump off of the shelf we had them on. The TV would always change the channel to baseball, and toys moved and played with themselves overnight. We were never afraid, though, so we didn't mind it. Now there is someone who sits on the foot of my bed, but I only ever feel them standing up, the same way a bed raises when a dog jumps off. I don't notice it that often, but it's always around 4:10, 4:20 a.m. It startles me enough that I have to get up for a while, but I'm not afraid of it because it feels like I'm being watched over, and it feels a lot like it's my grandfather.
I saw one sitting in the back of my car in the parking lot under my office. No one I knew, middle of the day. No spooky circumstances, but he was as clear as if he was a real person sitting there. I turned around to check my bag was in the back seat, and he was sitting there looking at me. Car was parked, and I was about to start it up. I got a fright, of course, kind of jumped and twisted back to the front and jumped out. When I looked back in through the window, there was no one there or anywhere. He was wearing stone-wash gray jeans and a brownish jumper. Like he was from the early 90s, he was a teenager, I think, with dark circles under his eyes. Not familiar to me at all. Nothing like that has ever happened to me before or since, but it made me a believer.
I had an experience with one when I was 12. I started to hear whispering, coming from a corner of my room, so I started talking back to it like the naive child I was. I asked who they were. She said her name was Mary and she died of an illness a long time ago when she was 6 or 7. I asked if she was a ghost, and she said yes, and that she just wanted a friend. One day I asked to see her, and I watched as this purple mist formed in the corner of my room and flowed around my bed. At that point I was scared, and ran out into the living room texting my best friend about what happened. I watched it float down the hallway into the wall beside me, before the mist disappeared and the shadow of a little girl with a frilly dress and pigtails appeared. At this point I was absolutely terrified and called my mom to come, pick me up and take me to work with her. But the mist followed me there, and even to lunch with my mom and my uncle. We moved out of the apartment a few years later. I had a few experiences after this of her tugging on my hair and tapping on my back. My family does not have any history of schizophrenia or mental disorders that cause hallucinations. My mom took me to a psychiatrist after this incident, but they said I was totally fine.
I've believed in ghosts as long as I can remember. There is an old man in my parents' home. He used to stand in the hallway between mine and my sister's room. He wasn't ever scary, but he would make weird things happen. Things would move, lights would turn off and on, and the TV would change channels rapidly while you were watching something. My mom suspects the old man followed her from the old farmhouse her and my dad lived in when they were first married. My dad was a firefighter, and after he and my mom moved from the old farmhouse, it was set to be burned down for fire training. My dad was the one who lit the fire, so my mom believes the old man just attached and followed dad to their new home. And while nobody has seen the old man in years, since my siblings and I moved out years ago, my mom reports things still happening in their home. I also used to see a skeleton man that would walk across the doorway from the kitchen to the dining room. He wasn't just a skeleton, but he had black trousers, a black and white striped shirt, suspenders, and a bowler hat. It was almost cartoonish. I'd see skeleton man regularly from the time I was about 2 to 7 years old. He would always make me feel uneasy.
I've seen a few ghosts and had 2 confirmed by others without me saying a word. The most notable one was when I was visiting Italy with my Italian father. We had had a big stupid screaming match and then went to bed, shared room. I was laying in the dark and looked over and saw an old bald man with a beard, colorless, just the chest up, in sort of a robe or tunic. My instinct is to always go, brains are funny, and think nothing of it. I said nothing about it because to me it was nothing. The next morning, my dad told me he woke up and saw an old bald man with a beard, full body and full color, wearing a brown tunic, standing over me and telling him in Italian to not worry about the fight. It was just stress. It makes sense to me he saw a much clearer version. He'd had a lot more experiences than I ever had, but it absolutely blew my mind. And the fact it was referencing something that just happened made it impossible to write off as residual. And believe me, I know what sleep paralysis is. And long after this incident, I've had hypnagogic hallucinations from medication. I always knew those weren't real. This was different.